How many of you feel that fantasy sports are just a game? A lot of people would agree that they are indeed just a game. However, there are many others that think fantasy sports are more than just that. Fantasy sports can help build skills that you would use in everyday life. According to a 2017 study conducted by the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association, approximately 59.3 million Americans and Canadians played fantasy sports. 84% of those players partake in a live fantasy draft party. Draft parties are a great way for friends to get together that may not see each other that often. Fantasy sports are a great way for friends to stay in touch year after year. Everyone knows that friendships fade as you grow older, and fantasy sports help keep those friendships glued together. I keep in touch with friends that I haven't seen since high school, and that was almost 11 years ago. Fantasy sports help strengthen those relationships. 67% of the 59.3 million fantasy players are employed full-time. Fantasy sports can help build camaraderie in the workplace. They give you and your coworkers a common subject to talk about when in the break room or hanging around the water cooler. Employees can discuss their weekly performances with their colleagues and compare teams in their leagues. Playing fantasy sports can also benefit you by improving your research skills. When you're preparing for your draft, you'll want to dive into specific stats about the players and teams involved. For example, you might want to do some research on what running back you want to take in the first round of your draft. You're going to research and compare a couple different players and their stats from last year and how they performed. Throughout the season, you'll be reading news articles and injury reports about your players and the teams that you face. Playing fantasy sports also makes watching games much more interesting. Nobody wants to watch a team like the Minnesota Vikings play a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, especially when they're having a terrible season. However, you might be more interested if you have a guy on your team playing in that game. Having a stake in the game makes everything worth watching. There are some ways that playing fantasy sports can benefit you. Whether you're talking with old friends or coworkers, if you're hanging around the office, fantasy sports can help bring you together. Thank you.